Hi, I'm Christine Herman of Herman's Quality Meat Shop in Newark, Delaware. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, Pulled Pork Part 2, we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to be showing you how to pull your smoked pork shoulder and also what to look for to make sure you remove from the pork shoulder so it doesn't end up in your finished product. Are you ready? Okay, so here we have our pork shoulder, and just a quick synopsis of where we were before. When we started is we had a raw piece of pork, the shoulder, and I seasoned it, marinated it overnight basically in that seasoning, and I put mine in the smoker for a couple hours, low and slow, and then I put it into basically a crock pot with some special sauce. Be right back. Some special sauce and some onions, and I let it slow cook. And once it's cooked to temperature and is ready to pull, I take it out and I let it cool down, because I can tell you one of the things that I've learned is if you put it in the refrigerator, it's really hard to pull it. But if you let it come to room temperature or thereabouts, or even warm, it's much easier to pull. So you want to do this in a timely fashion. And these are all the delicious onions. I'm going to kind of scrape them off and put them back in the pot. I left the bone in this, so I'm going to pull it apart. And there's lots of good stuff in there. So I'm just going to, I like to use my hands when I do this. I'm very hands-on, if you will. And there's some gooey stuff in here, and I'm going to kind of refer to it in that way. So here's a nice piece. You just kind of pull it apart. And there's another good piece. This doesn't take long, but here's a nice chunk of fat and like a membrane of sorts. You want to make sure you remove that. And here's a vein. You kind of see that guy there. You want to make sure that doesn't end up in your pork. There are tools out there that are basically like claws, and I'm just kind of pulling it with my hands that are kind of like claws that you could use going this way. I don't personally care for them because you can miss a lot, and B, I like to feel my food. Doesn't sound right, but I do have gloves on. And this way I can look and see what is going on that I want to make sure does or does not end up in my meat, because to me there's nothing worse than biting into something that is not supposed to be there. And like this little piece here, I know that's may seem incidental to you, but to me it's kind of like biting into a shell, like an eggshell, and I'm not having that. I'm just like too picky. And here's another portion of gooey stuff. Yep, real intelligent conversation I'm having right now. But anyway, you can see that this, you can just separate it by hand. You don't want that in your pulled pork. At least I don't. And I'd be pretty offended personally if I was biting into somebody else's pulled pork and tasted that. So we're just going to kind of pull it. You get certain sections of the meat that just come right apart. And again, with your hands, kind of can scrape out like this, again, this something that's not very appealing. And here you can do the same thing. There's a whole layer of fat on the inside. This is the section, the opposite of the bone. And take a look at that. See, you don't want that in your pulled pork. However, mixed in is some good stuff. So you want to make sure that you get the good stuff, separate it from the not so good stuff. And there you have it. And some of these bigger pieces you could cut with a knife if you wanted them smaller, depending upon what you prefer. But I'm just going to pull it apart quickly like that. This doesn't take long. And again, the big secret is to make sure that it's at least room temperature. Here's another handful of less desirable. This darker meat is really delicious because that's the outside that's gotten nice and barbecued or smoked. And you can always just make this right in your crock pot. And the fatty bottom portion right here, this is where the fat is. There's a section of meat that I have to tell you, you pull that fat off, and you pull this out right here. If you can see that, this comes off. Kind of slide that out. And then, again, with your hands, you want to pull that fat out because you don't want that in your pulled pork. You can just put this whole thing, you don't even have to smoke it. You can just put it in your crock pot and let it slow cook for the whole day. I like to do this in stages, as I've said. Now, again, I'm going to go back to this fatty piece here because there's a layer of meat that is my secret, favorite part. And I'm going to show this to you. It can get lost very easily. Can you see that right there? So it's just underneath this outer layer of fat, and it pulls and comes out very carefully. It is the most tender. I'm telling you, it is the most tender piece. You want to just, I'm not going to do it on camera, but you could take a piece, take a snack. Because once you mix it in, you don't know the difference. But let me tell you, oh, there's a vein right there. See him hanging? That is, to me, the best, the sweetest piece of meat right there. Can you see where I am? It can easily be forgotten or considered fat, but no, 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 no. You don't want to lose that. You want to just set that aside for you. Just kidding. But you want to add it in. You don't want to waste it because it is part of the good stuff. All right, we've gotten pretty much all that we can out of this. And now we're going to go to the other back portion. And again, you've got this fat here. You want to make sure you get rid of that. And this is a nice piece here that you could actually cut with your knife and make smaller or break it apart, however you want to do it. And it's nice and easily pulled, as you can see. You can cut it up. You can cut up into chunks if you want. I like to pull it, as I said, because I like to get my hands in to know what it feels like. This section is the bone, the shoulder bone. I'm going to take that out because there's a couple little portions in here that I want to show you. Oh, I'm actually almost done. Comes right out nice and clean. Take that off. And you can see maybe there's some more veins in there we don't want. This comes off the back. We can just discard that. And then we're going to take this meat, and again, look what I found. You don't want that in there. And just drop it in. I'm just going to do this. It doesn't take long. Once, like I said, it's room temperature. Break it up. Here's another piece. This guy here, here's what I want to show you. It actually mimics a piece of meat, and there's some meat wrapped around it. I'm going to sort of pull that out, but when you see what I've got in my hand, you're going to see there's like a, I don't even know, it's a tendon, and the meat's sort of wrapped around it, but you want to make sure you don't put that, it just comes apart, but you want to make sure that you don't put that in your pulled pork. That's really important. I found that out the hard way as I was doing this one day in my early days of making pulled pork. I was like, what in the world is that? Because when you're cutting the meat, it's not readily available because it's hidden underneath the bone. That's one of my other big secrets. And you see this little like darker black? That's again another vein you want to make sure you take out of there. Because just because it's got barbecue sauce on it doesn't mean you want to eat it. Can you tell that I'm picky? And then I like to just kind of nip some of the edges. And there's a little bit of meat hidden in the fat, and we can do without that. We just have this one last chunk. And then here's another section here. Just do it in sections, nice and slow. Comes right out. Here's another oddity within the pork shoulder. You want to carefully make sure you get this out also. And again, you see I'm working over a dish or your countertop so that nothing falls into the trash can. or back into the pot that you can't distinguish one from the good from the not so good. And here's another big piece that you want to make sure does not end up in your pulled pork. Spread it out, grab another piece. There's another vein. And sometimes you lose a little meat along the road, but that's okay. Better to not have the stuff in there that's not so good. See what we found here? Make sure we get that out. Oh. Kind of holding on to this one end that I don't want and pulling with the rest. Getting rid of this. Get that black thing off of there. Yep, slip that in there, don't want him. And our last piece has a few little goodies in there we want to make sure don't end up into our pot of gold. Pork gold, that is. All right, we're down to one last piece. I just kind of break it up with my hands as I go. Gloves help because otherwise your hands smell like barbecue for 3 days, no matter how many dishes you wash. It's not such a bad thing, but at the same time, you might want to go with the gloves. It's far more sanitary too. And there you have it. A couple last little pieces. Break them apart. See what's in here. Everything else looks good. Oh, found something else we don't want. And there you go. And then you just blend it all into your sauce, which I'll show you here in a minute. You want to blend it into your sauce nicely. Coat the flavor. What I like to do now is let it set up overnight if I have time, and any of the extra fat that's in the broth will come to the surface or within the meat, and you could actually pull that out, little chunks of like orange yellow fat, and then you heat it up either in your crock pot or your pot, whatever you're using, and there you have it, your pulled pork. Yum. My favorite. Hope that was helpful. Now that we've pulled our pork shoulder and we're ready to clean up, let's talk about doing some dishes. And we're going to do them sustainably. Different, right? Although your pulled pork recipe is a relatively easy dish to clean up, since you've probably used a smoker or a crock pot and you only have a few miscellaneous dishes like this one to wash, you have to decide if it's better to use a dishwasher or wash them by hand. Interesting thought. Did you know that washing dishes by hand can use anywhere from 9 to 27 gallons of water versus an Energy Star dishwasher that could wash a full load of dishes and maybe 6 gallons of water or less? Kind of crazy, right? I did some research on hand washing dishes versus using a dishwasher. I'm going to share with you what I found. So if you are only washing a few dishes or a few pots and pans that don't go into the dishwasher anyway, it's best to hand wash them, and preferably soon after you use them. And the best way to wash them is to fill a bowl or a sink with warm or hot water and add a little bit of soap to it. And start with the least dirty to the dirtiest. Then rinse them in hot water. And my favorite tip is to dry them at least partially and then let them air dry the rest of the way and then put them away. If you're using your dishwasher, it's always best to run a full load instead of a partial load. And it doesn't hurt to let dishes sit in the dishwasher a day or two before actually running a full load. It will use much less water and soap in the long run. I'd like to suggest scraping off some of the larger particles before you load your dishwasher, but be sure not to remove too much in case your dishwasher is designed to recognize how much food or dirt is, not dirt, but dirty dishes is on the dishes, because then your dishwasher will actually run less efficiently if you take too much away. Now, I'm not here to suggest that you go out and buy a new dishwasher. That's not my job. But I am suggesting that you know how your dishwasher functions so you can take full advantage and maximize the capability that your dishwasher has to offer. Because let's face it, you want to spend more time enjoying your pulled pork than washing dishes, right? I know that. So I hope this was a helpful tip. Maybe not a new one, and maybe just a refresher, but just the same, enjoy your pulled pork and keep those dishes clean. Pulled pork, whether you smoke the shoulder or slow cook it in a crock pot, the end result is a scrumptious pot of pork perfection for sandwiches or a warm bowl full on a cold winter's night. And a side of coleslaw, delicious. I hope you found this video to be fun, helpful, and that you give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and please feel free to share it with a friend or a family member and comment below. We look forward to hearing from you soon. God bless. Christine Herman.